unfitly to be parents. Well, that's what happened to a couple from Essex whose 4-year-old daughter and 14-month-old son were put up for adoption on the orders of a High Court judge. Well, in a moment we'll speak to the couple's local MP who's campaigning on their behalf, Eric Pickles, and to their local council. But first, Sky's Alex Rossi reports on the case.
This is their bedroom where my son and daughter slept and played.
It's been nearly a year since this couple's 2 children were taken away from them by the courts. Social workers decided they weren't fit to be parents, and their 4-year-old daughter and baby son are now up for adoption. The couple can't be named for legal reasons, but feel they've been singled out by the state because she has an IQ of 60.
They've snatched him away, basically, because they haven't done nothing wrong.
None of us have done nothing wrong. All we've done was just try to be loving parents, which we still are loving parents.
The judgment from the family court ruled that although the couple had never abused their children, they were at risk of emotional harm.
Experts say there are thousands of cases across the country where mothers and fathers have had their children taken away from them because social services have deemed them to be unfit. The central issue then is how much power should the state have when it comes to deciding who can or cannot be a family.
There are as many as 250,000 parents with learning difficulties in the United Kingdom, and more of them are coming to the attention of social services. According to research from the University of Sheffield, 20% of care proceedings in this country involve parents with a learning disability, even though the number of mothers and fathers with difficulties represents less than 1% of the whole. Friends and supporters of this family have described it as a form of discrimination against the vulnerable social minority.
This is a total outrage. This is state-sponsored kidnapping of young children by social workers under the auspices of Essex County Council, backed up by the secrecy of the family court.
But Essex Social Services denies it's targeted the couple. It says it's done everything it can to keep the family together.
One supporter of the family has described this as state-sponsored kidnap. Is that fair?
That's absolutely disgraceful. These children were found to be at risk of significant harm, and in those instances highly professional social workers decided that something needed to be done, and that decision was upheld by a judge.
All involved admit this is a tragic case. This couple won't be able to have any contact with their children until they reach the age of 18.
We're the natural parents. We've got every right to have our children.
Alex Rossi, Sky News.
We can speak now to the couple's local Conservative MP, Eric Pickles. It's a desperate case, really, this Eric Pickles, that you've taken up. But it was, as Tracy Chapman stressed in that piece, examined by professional social workers and ultimately a judge.
Oh, absolutely. But it was looked at in secrecy. I mean, I think we've got to understand that this couple are in a state of bewilderment as to what the problem was. They couldn't tell their employers. They can't really tell the members of the public. They didn't have a right to tell me until the 12th of April this year. And I believe it is possible for these kind of discussions to take place in public. After all, we do have the experience of the criminal courts, whereas this was a criminal case, it could be fully reported, but the secrecy and the anonymity of the couple could be preserved.
But that is in the interest, surely, of the child, and the anonymity that they are due within this sort of process, presumably.
Yeah, we managed to do that quite well in the criminal law, and after all, I think it's anathema to the British system to have secret courts. I mean, this isn't an act of terrorism, this isn't a matter of state security, this is about the most fundamental freedom of being able to look after your own child and having your child taken away from you by the state.
And yet we do have all the details now of the judgment and the conclusions reached by the judgment of Justice Palfrey. And I'll just mention perhaps one insight into it: the likelihood of physical harm arising from the parents' inability to recognise the children's health needs or respond appropriately when they were unwell. I mean, there has to be a safety net there somewhere.
Of course, but with enormous respect to the judge. I mean, I've read the court's notes, I've read the allegations specific to that. These people were surrounded by social workers. At one point, I think 16 individual social workers were involved in their case. And it did seem to me a very strange thing that at one point when they were discussing whether or not to put the additional child on the child protection register, a decision was made by social services to remove both children from the register, and yet within a matter of months the whole process had been reversed and we moved towards taking these children permanently away from their natural parents.
It is a desperately difficult decision process to make, however those terms are addressed and however the procedures are approached. These social workers and this judge has to think ahead to the future and just try to imagine that one instance when something could go wrong because of a failure of judgment, a failure of insight or anticipatory nature of those parents. And they've got to provide that safety net, surely.
I mean, I do think that these bricks have been built on straw and there have been a series of incidents. And I also believe that motivation has been placed upon my two constituents, which a reasonable person wouldn't bear. I mean, I asked these social workers to give me two clear examples of where there was a neglect of parenting. And the two examples they gave me, first of all, was that when they fed the children with crisps and sandwiches, they allowed the child to have crisps first, and they were too full to have the sandwiches. And second, that they allowed the young girl to stay up until 8 o'clock at night. I have to say, I've got a lot of friends with children of the same age who are guilty of both those terrible parenting pressures. That's not a basis to take children away from their parents.
But having said that, there only would need to be one instance where a failure on either of those parents' part, perhaps because of their lack of ability to foresee an event surrounding them within the home, one failure and the whole heavens and earth would come crashing down on social services and say, why on earth wasn't this picked up? Why on earth wasn't this considered? I'm simply putting
I put the point, and these points have been put to him, and forgive me if I seemed impatient. But we aren't talking here about really stupid people. We're talking about a chap who's held down a job for over 20 years with the same employer. We're talking about a woman who has an IQ admittedly of 60, but she isn't stupid. I mean, she's capable and she clearly loves her children. And I actually think the bond between child and parent is something sacred that the state should not in any way interfere. These aren't children that regularly appear at the emergency department. There's no history of abuse. That's what social services be concentrating on, not making an authority decision of whether or not, well, maybe if with different kind of parents they might be emotionally strong or they might be materially better off or psychologically better off. The bond between child and parent is a sacred one, and the state should not interfere unless there's a real likelihood of harm.
Okay, Eric Pickles will be putting all those points to one of the councillors involved in this case. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.